humbled to be here. I'm humbled to be here once again. I think I joined you guys last year. There was a session we had last year, and it's really humbling to be here because there are lots of people that could be presenting this, and I'm really glad to have you, have me here, and also for the attendees, to spare a moment on a Thursday morning to listen to this. So I'm delighted today to share a few thoughts on the changes that have happened in our company, our company laws, and also laws that affect our companies in Uganda. And this is premised on changes that have occurred in the year 2022. And so let's get straight into it. We'll be looking at the laws that have been recently passed relating to companies. We'll look at the amendments to the Companies Act, and then we shall also have a look at other significant new compliance requirements for companies. So I understand a majority or a lot of you that are on this call own businesses. So the purpose of this is not to make it academic, but it's to share how we can practically ensure that our companies, our partnerships, whatever form of business you have is compliant with the law, because we know that it's important that your company is compliant so that you can focus and do business, focus on your core business. When your company is compliant, you have no issues with the authorities. You can grow, and actually also makes you investor ready, investor ready and bankable. So so these are some of the new laws. Not some, these are the new laws that have been passed in the past year, which I want us to take note of. We will not look at this from, say, a very technical perspective. We'll just try and get an overview and get the gist of each law, yeah? So we'll be looking at the Companies Amendment Act. That's going to be the core of our discussion, because we're really looking at how companies have been affected. That's like the biggest business entity that's utilized by people. So companies are what a lot of people use, but also there's, of course, we are mindful that those of you on this call who are probably operating as sole proprietorships or partnerships and the like. So the other law we'll consider is the Anti-Money Laundering Amendment Act 2022. We'll also look at the Partnerships Amendment Act 2022. We'll also look at the Trustees Incorporation Amendment Act 2022. We shall also look at the Cooperative Societies Amendment Act 2022. We shall consider the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act 2022. We shall also have a look at the Insolvency Amendment Act 2022. The Data Protection and Privacy Policy Regulations 2021. I have included this, although they're not part of last year's amendment, but because the enforcement of data privacy, enforcement of the regulations on data protection and privacy really happened last year. Last year is when the Personal Data Protection Office was set up, and also the public was given notice to comply. Then the most recent one is just last month, the Companies Beneficial Ownership Regulations 2023. So without much ado, let's look at the changes. We'll start with the changes in the Companies Act. I'm going to go over them. Like I said, I want this to be practical. And really, we just want to be able to sieve and get the gist of the law. One which is very important to note is that the concept of beneficial ownership has been introduced. I'll be talking much more about that in my presentation, but basically beneficial ownership is a scenario where the government, or in this case, the regulator, would like to know who the true owners of a company are. So we all know that when you're registering a business, most times you're requested to identify yourself. So you identify yourself either as a member or as a shareholder or as a partner in the business or as a sole proprietor in the business. And and most times the people that, you know, when you put your information there, that's the person that owns the business. But there are also scenarios where people have fronted others as owners, and yet those are not the true owners. So we have a person's name in the registry, that's at the company's registry or the partnership registry or whatever other registry, you know, the government has for companies. And yet that's not the actual person. Of course, then that has, you know, it endorses or enables people to do business without the government being in the know of who is actually, you know, who actually owns this business. And so propagates vices such as, you know, tax evasion, funding of illegal acts by companies and the like. So this new law intends to address that issue. So it's a coordinated effort by governments around the world to address. So timelines have been set in which different governments are to introduce beneficial ownership laws. We'll get into the details of that along the way. Also, the Act now defines who a promoter is. You know, the people that actually set up the company, like when you're setting up a company, there's the initial group of people that are, you know, that go around doing the registration and the like. So that is also defined. I won't get into detail regarding that issue. But I think the next one is very fundamental. The mode of registration of a company has changed now under the new law. So the Companies Amendment Act was passed in August by Parliament and assented to by the President in September. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. And the law has simplified the method of registration. Previously, we would have to, you know, if you know your company registration process, you'd file your memorandum of association, statement of nominal capital, form for registration of the company. But now there's one consolidated form which contains all the information that initially was contained in all the separate forms. So I think that's a really good move by the government. It reduces paperwork, especially since we are, you know, trying to save our environment, and also considering that we've digitized the processes of registration are being digitized. It makes the files less heavy, and it's good for the system, like the digital system. So I think that's really good. The other thing that you know, we'll look at is now there's a requirement that you have to list your company's registration number and all the company documents. So that's, of course, that increases visibility, and it enables easy tracking of company information by all stakeholders. The other one is that in the previous law, there was an omission. A public company was not properly defined, but now the new law defines a public company as a company with a minimum of 7 members and without an upper limit. So if it's not a private company and it has 7 members and with no upper limit, then it's a public company, because private companies are limited, you know, to between 1 and 100 members. The other thing that we see here is that the registration of a memorandum of association is now optional. As I mentioned, the process has been simplified. So don't be surprised if you ask someone for a memorandum of association and they say, no, we don't have one. Because as I mentioned, the consolidated form can be used in lieu of the memorandum of association. But should you choose to, you can actually have a memorandum of association. The next thing is running along, because I'm mindful of time. The next thing that I want to mention is that previously in the companies law, public companies were required, all public companies were required to adopt a code of corporate governance provided for in the Companies Act. That was referred to as Table F. Now, it was recognized that there are some laws that provide codes of corporate governance for particular industries. Now, take the financial sector. The Financial Institutions Act has a code of corporate governance for banks. So then there was a contradiction in the sense that the banks then would wonder, should we be adhering with Table F or the code that is provided in the Financial Institutions Act? And so, in order to harmonize that position, there's the new law is that all public companies that do not have a specific code of conduct attributed or required of them by a particular law will then have to comply with Table F. So yeah, that's another change. Then this one is really nice. I think we should all take note of this one. The rest are also very relevant, but this is really important. We can now actually, under the new law, we can actually convert a company limited by guarantee to a company limited by shares. Previously, this was not possible. So if you have, say, an NGO, it's possible to convert that back to a company limited by shares, so to a for-profit entity. So we find there's now greater flexibility in terms of the forms and modes of doing business. So the process of doing business has become malleable. That's something that I think I applaud. That it's a good measure, and it will help the ease of doing business. It's good because previously you would have to wind up your company, maybe if you wanted to go and do business for profit, and yet you had a charity. Maybe you'd have to go wind up, it was costly, so this is a cheaper process. The other thing that has been done is they have done away with the concept of share warrants. Share warrants was basically the certificate showing proof that you own shares in a company. I think this is done because now proof of ownership can be, is digitized, and you can actually prove that without having to carry around a paper. So that's a good move, especially to protect our environment and the like. That's good. Also, so the other thing also is that's fundamental is that now foreign companies. This is now in relation to foreign companies. Foreign companies are required to first of all make out a balance sheet and profit and loss, even if they are, registered within the Commonwealth. Initially, they're not required to, but I think this is good because companies in the Commonwealth, that's like I think 53, 54 countries that were formerly colonized by Britain, were not required to present a balance sheet and profit and loss account to the registry. But now I think this is good for better, tax management and transparency, and allows maybe the likes of URA to better, assess taxes for foreign companies. And the other thing that we also note is foreign companies are also now required to follow the processes in the Insolvency Act. In relation to liquidation or winding up of the company. So that previously it was a foreign company would basically exit the jurisdiction without necessarily following those processes. But I think now that they're required to do that, it's easier for creditors, people that these foreign companies may owe money to, and the like. So it could be suppliers and the like. It's easier for them to enforce their rights because those rights are embedded in the Insolvency Act. So there are processes there which detail how you properly exit a jurisdiction. You don't just run away. So that's a good thing. I think it will protect us, especially those doing business with these foreign companies, those in Uganda. The other thing that I would like to mention is this is actually quite important. The registrar has gotten really expanded powers under the new law, the registrar of companies. And in this case, I refer to the registrar general. In this case, I think it's Madame Mercy Kenobwisho. She's the one that is the Registrar General, and her powers have been expanded to include maintaining a register of beneficial owners, as I've talked about. I've already talked about who beneficial owners are, to verify the identity of beneficial owners. That is to help, trace and say who are the actual owners of the business that is registered with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. Also, she has the power to enforce the provisions of the Anti-Money Laundering Act 2013. This is a law that looks to ensure that illicit gains and monies are actually traced and brought back to the rightful owners and utilized well. Are returned and therefore allows the government to have the money utilized properly. And also, she's also given powers to perform any other duty as the minister may prescribe by regulations. There are no regulations. Okay, yeah. The regulations that have been passed since this provision was introduced include the companies, beneficial owners regulations 2023, which were passed last month. So you can see that the powers of the registrar have expanded. It also includes the power to strike off a company from the register. Initially, as you'll see, the power to strike off a company was given to court. So the Registrar General had to go to court, apply to court, and that was tedious. But now, if for things like non-compliance, if a notice has been given by the registrar saying you're not complying, so annual returns and the like, and you do not respond, and there's no objection, satisfactory objection on the company's part, then the Registrar General can strike off the company, and that means deregister you as a company. So I think this is really important for business owners to know, because if you don't comply, know that the Registrar General has these powers. They've now been given powers to do so, to strike you off. The other thing that we need to take note of is, this is a good one as well. They have also simplified the process of winding up. So winding up is the process of closing your company. So how has it been simplified? It means this has been done because it's been done in situations where, say, the Registrar General is able to determine that there are no assets and liabilities. So if you have a new company, or refer to it as a shell company or a shelf company, a company that has not really traded, and you want to close it, it's an easy process now. You just go to the Registrar General, and Registrar General, and also the registrars that work with her. And you're able to have this company struck off the register. Previously, you'd had to go through the process that's provided in the Insolvency Act, winding up, which was quite tedious and costly. You had to advertise in the newspaper, you had to advertise in the Gazette, you had to pass notices, you had to appoint a liquidator. So I think this move is really, really great. It helps the public, and it's just going to make it cheaper for us to do business. Also, the new law does strip the registrar of the power of serving as a magistrate in situations where there are proceedings before her. So initially, the previous law, section 288 of the Companies Act, gave the Registrar General power to serve as a magistrate in proceedings before her, but that has been taken away. So yeah, that's it in regard to the reforms in the Companies Act. But I just want to quickly look at other significant reforms. I just want to be mindful of my time. Yeah, let's see. So other significant reforms, we're also looking at, so we can now look at the question of beneficial ownership deeper. We will start by looking at the purpose of beneficial ownership law. We are all familiar with the Panama Papers, I hope. These are, a few years ago, we had about Mossack Fonseca which was a farm that, you know, in a way, it was said to be hiding rich people's money. So things like shell corporations were used for illegal purposes, including fraud, tax evasion, and evading international sanctions. So with all, you know, we've heard about offshore accounts and the like. And I just mentioned earlier that, you know, in a situation where the identity or the of the owners of a company is not easily, not possible to identify easily, uh, it becomes a place, you know, it provides fertile ground for fraud, tax evasion, and you know now that's something that affects us at the end of the day, in the sense that governments are unable to collect taxes effectively, and obviously affects like service delivery and the like. So there is a coordinated international action. There is coordinated international action to address the issues of money laundering, tax evasion, and financing of terrorism. So that's where this, you know, this law comes or stems from those issues, you know, and I have already talked about the different regulations. So you can see here now the law on beneficial ownership, you know, includes the amendments to the Companies Act, Partnership Act, the Anti-Money Laundering Act was also, you know, also contains provisions. It also actually encourages that people file beneficial ownership forms with the Financial Intelligence Authority. So this law actually sets up a Financial Intelligence Authority to man and make sure that companies are not used for fraud and the things and the vices I've just mentioned.
Moses,
yeah.
Moses, a quick one. Some people are saying in the chat that we can't be heard. I don't know whether that's everyone. I see Eric. I think Job also said they couldn't hear.
Okay.
Eric, can you hear me? Eric and Job, I'm not very sure that it's on your side. I see it's on your side. All right. All right, I think Eric and Job, it's on your side. The rest seem to be able
They need to get out. They need to get out and get in.
All right, super. No worries. Moses, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Ronald. Sorry about that, guys, for the technical glitches you're facing. I hopefully, you know, be able to share this on YouTube and the like. So I was talking about there are different laws that provide, you know, and you know, requirement to provide any beneficial ownership information. So I've just listed Anti-Money Laundering Act, the Mineral and Mineral Act, the Mining and Mineral Act, sorry, which was passed last year by the president, Anti-Money Laundering Regulation of 2015, Anti-Money Laundering Amendment of Second Schedule Instrument 2020, the Income Tax Act, the Companies Beneficial Ownership Regulations, which I've already talked about, and the Partnership Beneficial Owner Regulations. So these are the laws, yeah? We won't get into the technicalities of them, but what I want us to do is to appreciate the essence and the key changes in those laws. Okay, so let me see if I can move. Oh, it seems to have frozen. Okay, next, okay. So I already defined a beneficial owner, but for purposes of, so each law has its own definition, but I was going to look at the definition provided for in the Companies Act, because I know all of us, majority of us are interested in the definition for companies. So a beneficial owner means a natural person. So not the fact that it's a natural person. Natural person means a person that's not, say, a company. It's someone who, you know, male or female, who has final ownership or control of a company or partnership. So this means that the law applies to companies and partnerships. So, or a natural person on whose behalf a transaction is conducted in a company. So it may be in relation, so it is in relation to the ownership of the company, but also situations where the person may not own the company, but has control over the company or the transactions the company, you know, participates in. Say, for example, if I don't own a mining company, But I know that this mining company is, doing gold mining in Movende, but I can by phone call, I can make a phone call to the directors and have them, make decisions for the company. That is a form of ownership and control. So you will have to declare to the Registrar General that you actually do have control over a particular company. So that's to ensure that, because if you have that kind of control, it means like, the proceeds of business would ultimately come to you, So the proceeds of business being like profits and the like, or some kind of allowances, any form of benefit. So that's important to note. So it's not necessarily just about owning, but also the ability to control the business also needs to be reported. So, but in other laws, of course, the definition includes a legal person. So if you're a company who owns another company, but for the sake of today's discussion, we'll just focus on the Companies Act. So the new requirement is that all companies are to disclose the personal information of the beneficial owners, and they are to create a register. Within your company, you create a register. So you say, okay, this person, is a shareholder. This other person may not be a shareholder, but has ultimate control of the company. And you ought to declare that to the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. So that's the new law. So the kind of information we're looking at is the name of the person. So this is the information it's disclosing. The passport number or the NIN of the person, looking at the nationality, date of birth, address, post address, email address, current phone number, and occupation. So that's the kind of information. And furthermore, the kind of information you would break it down here now. You would state how many shares the person owns. If it's not that the person is a direct owner, you mention how they are related to the company. So if it's indirectly, mention that they probably have ultimate control of the company. So you'd put that information there. So that's a new requirement. And the good thing is that you don't have to pay any money to register this. It's a free service at the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, but there's a deadline of 11th Feb, which is I think Saturday. So this needs to be done ASAP because the penalties in the law are quite stiff. It is 500,000 by the company per day, and also by each officer of the company, 500,000 by each officer of the company per day. So I'm really encouraging that. The form is not difficult to fill. I'm encouraging that you do this filing before the deadline. Yeah. Then the next thing, the last thing I'd like to talk to us about is the introduction of the Personal Data Protection Office, which is created under the Data Protection and Privacy Act of 2019, and also the regulations, Data Protection and Privacy Regulations of 2021, which now require that persons register with the Personal Data Protection Office. The purpose of the law is to protect. So it's enacted to protect the privacy of the individual and of personal data by regulating the collection and processing of personal information. It was noted that a lot of people would collect information and use it for direct selling. So they would market, you'd get random messages from, say, supermarkets you've never gone to, or from companies you've never, interacted with, and you're wondering how they got your phone number. So that law is there to regulate that. It mirrors the standards in Europe, the general data protection standards by the European Union. So a lot of it is similar. The law is very, very similar in that regard. So it protects the rights of persons whose data is collected. That's really, really, the essence of the law. And the law applies to these categories of people. It applies to individuals. It applies to institutions, that's companies. It applies to public bodies. So even government itself is required to adhere with the provisions of this law. So it applies to people who collect, so those who collect data, those who process data, those who hold data, and those using personal data within Uganda and outside Uganda, if that information relates to Ugandan citizens. So now, like Ugandans who work in the diaspora, if their companies collect that information, they ought to adhere with the laws in Uganda. And of course, let's try and define personal data. So personal data includes information relating to the nationality, age, marital status of the person, the education level, occupation of the person, an identification number, symbol, or other particulars assigned to a person like phone numbers and the like, identity data, like, videos and the like, TikTok accounts and all those things, Instagram accounts. Other information which is in the possession of or is likely to come into the possession of the data controller and includes things like expressions of opinion about the individual. So even like political leaning, information around that, all of that is protected. So how do we comply? Like I've talked about the regulator. The regulator is the Personal Data Protection Office, which is situated at the National Information Technology Authority's office, which is under the Ministry of ICT. So you have to register with the Personal Data Protection Office by filling in, it is a form that's provided for, and making an annual payment of 100,000. So this is a payment for this, and you pay it annually. And then companies that process large information. So large information is defined depending on, if you look at the regulations, it defines it as, they look at like the geographical scope your company covers, the nature, the nature of information, in terms of quantity and the like, to determine whether it's large. And those processing special personal data. So there's a category of information referred to as special personal data under the law. This includes information like HIV status, information that, like on where someone lives and that kind of information. So that kind of information needs to be protected. And for that reason, the law requires a company to appoint a data protection officer within your organization. Now, a data protection officer is basically someone who sits in the organization and is able to ensure that the law is complied with, So the roles of this data protection officer include, so it can be someone within the organization, or you can appoint one of your consultants, a lawyer, to be your data protection officer. But the duty of this person is to conduct regular assessment and audits to ensure compliance with the Act, serve as a point of contact between the person, institution, or public body, maintain records of all data processing activities conducted within your company, respond to all data subjects, these are like employees and the like, and inform them about how their personal data is being used, what measures the person or the company has put in place to protect that information. Ensure that the data subjects request to see copies of their personal data. So like employees, if employees want to see copies of their personal data or have their personal data erased, are fulfilled or responded to as necessary. So this role is very sensitive because if you don't comply with it, there are penalties in the law, very severe penalties, including imprisonment. And also because of the sensitivity of the matter, this is personal information. And the data protection officer is also required to file an annual report. There's a format for that in the law. File it and ensure that the National Data Protection Office director is informed of changes in terms of the information that's being collected. So when you look at nature of information, the form, we'll go over it maybe at a later time, but because of time we can't. But we just, you realize that there are categories of information you'll have to declare. Do you have CCTV cameras, for example? So you're collecting video information. Do you have a register, at reception? That means you're collecting, information, identifying information such as names, phone numbers. So the categories of information, and the law provides for that. But this is just the essence of the law, and I thought I should stop there. I'm now open to taking questions. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Moses, for that submission. Very, very insightful, quite a lot happening. I noticed on your first slide, everything happened in 2022. And in as much as many may think nothing happened during that year, there is quite a lot which went in. And I think Moses has helped highlight that for us in the simplest way possible. At this moment, we can have a couple of questions that come through. Please do raise your hand if you want to ask a question or a clarification, and then you could also choose to put it in the chat box. I'll start with Winfred. Winfred, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Ronald. My question is on the beneficial ownership form. My understanding, they were asking us to fill this form when we had entities or companies that were shareholders in the company. Do you require this form to be filed by every single company, even where the shareholders are just Winnie and Ronald? Do we file it and then put nil? What do we do? There is so much panic right now in the market because of the deadline of 11th, and yet there's no clarity on the URSP website about what happens if the shareholders are individuals. If we are the owners, do we file a blank form? Is there a fee for it? Please give us some clarity.
Right. Thank you so much. Winfred Biarhanga, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. My question is on two things. One of them is on the data protection. I'm looking at like research. What applies? How does this law apply to somebody who is doing research? Because he's also collecting data. And then the other issue still on data, I'm imagining like you have a school or you have a place where people come in and they write their details. Does that also require you to have a data management officer? Because that's not being clear for me. And the other one, I think Winnie has asked about it, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wilfred. I will have Emmanuel, then Paul, then Maureen. Emmanuel, you go first.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Mine is one question and one comment. The question is, when filling in the form, the section of the NIN, when I tried to fill my NIN, when I completed to fill it in, the thing went blank. So I don't know colleagues who has filled the form and has filled that NIN portion. How did they succeed with that? Then the comment is this 500,000 charge per day, which is outrageous. And I think for companies that are striving to survive, such charges will just bring them down. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we have Paul?
Thank you, Ronald. And thank you for this opportunity. Mine is on the submission of the form, the beneficial owner form. I've checked through all the communications about this and doesn't give any guidance on where to submit. Is there an online option, or the form must be physically submitted to URSP? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul and Maureen. And then I will ask Moses to respond to those. Maureen, over to you.
if it is a business which is registered but not completely a company, the registration process is not complete, like most SMEs or most businesses are, should they also fill in that form?
All right, thank you. I hope you captured those, Moses. Let me hand over to you, then we'll take another round.
Yes, I have. I was writing them down. Thank you, everyone, for the insightful questions. I'll start from the beginning. So, so the question is, do owners need to file? And in this case, someone is asking that if I'm already listed as owner of the business, say in the memorandum of association, so I'm listed as a shareholder already, do I need to notify the Registrar General? And the answer to that is yes, because the form requires you to list both existing owners and those that may not be known to the Registrar General. So this form, what is happening is a register of owners is being created. So we have a company's registry, but now there's a new register referred to as the beneficial ownership register in each company. So it's required that you mention existing owners and those who may not be known. So maybe indirect owners. If you look at the two types of forms, the form that is provided by the Financial Intelligence Authority, which is not yet calling us to make, to register with them. I'm just using it as a basis. It does actually list that you mention indirect owners and direct owners. So direct owners are people who are already on a memorandum. So it's direct that, I can look at the company documents and you are listed as owner. And indirect is where, as I mentioned previously, it may be that I'm not on the list of owners, but I can make a phone call and direct the company on how to do business. So let's just answer that question briefly. It's everyone needs to file, whether you're already an existing owner or not. So you'll have to put. So if you notice, the form actually has a part and says, how are you an owner? So you mention that I'm a existing shareholder, or if not, you can say indirect owner, in the form. So that's how you would fill it out. Then the next person asked, how does the law on data protection apply to people doing research? If you noticed, I know it was a bit rushed, but I explained that that the law, the data protection and privacy law, applies both to individuals, institutions, and public bodies. So every individual that collects data, so you're either collecting or you're holding or you are processing information. And in this case, if you look at a researcher's job, you're collecting, so long as this information you're collecting can be defined as personal data. I listed to you what includes personal information. So things like phone numbers, names, identifying information, and other categories of information that fall under the definition of personal data. Then you will have to comply and register that with the Personal Data Protection Office. So in that regard, the third question is also answered, because does a school need to register the Personal Data Protection Office? Yes, it does, so long as it collects personal data. But you also asked within that question, you asked whether the school would need to appoint a data protection officer. That really depends on two aspects. Whether the school is processing large information, and in this case, schools would naturally do, because if you look at the regulations, they try and define what large information would look like. They look at things like the geographical scope of the information. So you collect information of people that live in a wide area. A school would have people, say, who live in Makindye, who live in Tinda. So the geographical scope is naturally big. So in that case, I would say schools would be required to appoint data protection officers. So the other category of people who need to appoint data protection officers, where you collect special personal data. This includes like health records, things like HIV status and the like. That's considered very sensitive information. And whether you're small or not, or large, you would have to register the Personal Data Protection Office. So this means like small clinics and the like, who collect very special personal information, like health information, would be required to register with the Personal Data Protection Office. Then to answer the next question, so the issue of how do you file the beneficial ownership form? Is it electronically filed? Is it done physically? Currently, the process is physical. So they accept scanned copies, so you can sign even from out of the country. I personally went to the Uganda Registration Services Bureau to ascertain, because this is new to all of us, and they guided and said that you can have scanned copies, but you have to deliver them like physically. They're not yet, did not have a section in their portal which allows us to the electronic portal which allows us to do it electronically. So it's a physical delivery, and that means, of course, if you look at the form, there's a provision for filling in the name. So I hope that answers the question of how do you actually fill in your name. You just get your name number and write it there. Is that actually just show that form online here. And then the next question, I think we have answered that on how the form is submitted. Then the last question we had in this round was, what happens to people who are not companies, maybe who are in the process of registering your business, have not yet completed that process? So the answer here is, if you're not yet technically speaking, if you're not yet a business or a company before the deadline, which is 11th, I suppose then going forward, you do have a right to, because the law cannot act backwards retrospectively. So you would then be you then able to file. I presume you'd then be able to file at when you're registered. So I hope that answers that question. But also to highlight that this law also requires partnerships to file. So there are businesses that are registered under the Partnerships Act would be required to register with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. So they're not exempt. The categories that are exempt are sole proprietorships, I believe, are not covered by this. So people who have like business names and doing business as sole proprietorships are not covered. Yeah. So I hope that answers those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. There were a couple of hands. I see, Paul, your hand is still up. I don't know whether it's up from the previous question or it's a new question.
Well, it's I think previous, but I don't know whether I missed out on the submission bit. I think I missed it out. I don't know where I was. Submission of the BO form. Where is there an online option?
No, there's no online option. Physically, you submit physically to the URSB, but the good thing is you can have it. You can submit a scanned copy. It doesn't have to be like an original form. That means if you have your director is out of town, you can have them sign and scan back to you. So that's okay.
All right, Emmanuel, please go ahead and ask your question. Moses, there are also a couple of questions in the chat box, so you can be scanning through as we receive these other questions.
Okay.
Emmanuel, go ahead. Yes, Emmanuel. Emmanuel, don't seem to hear you. I see your mic is unmuted, but I don't hear what you're saying. All right, possibly, Emma, you can put your question in the chat box. Winfred, is this a hand which kept up?
As Morna is just asking for clarification, is it free filing this form? You know, most of the forms you have to go do an assessment, file. If we can have that clarity, I think it will be easier for us to comply. Do I just fill in and submit and, come back?
Yeah, is it free filing the form? That question Moses will address. At the BA.
Sorry, Ronald, I missed your question.
Oh, sorry. I think I saw your hand up. I don't know whether you put it
No,
down.
no, it's not mine. It's not mine. Sorry.
Okay, good. Super. Wilfred?
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. There is a question in the chat box, which to me is of interest, whether sole proprietors also have to do the beneficial owners filing, because it is not mentioned, it's not clear yet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Great. Super. Emmanuel has also put his question in the chat box. Emmanuel's question is, where do we get the form? Do we download it from the URSB portal, or we have to go to URSB and pick it physically? Great. I'll let Moses answer those questions, the ones in the chat and the one which Wilfred asked.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with the ones that have been asked as I go through the chat. The first question is the form free? Is the process free? Yes, it's free. The process is free. There's no payment that you have to make. Then do sole proprietors have to file? No, they don't have to, because if you see, the laws that were amended include the Partnerships Act and the Companies Act. So this does not cover business names, you get. So that's my understanding. So proprietorships, no. Then where do you get the form? You can get this form on the URSB website. Just Google and Uganda Registration Services Bureau and scan through the list of services there. You should be able to quickly. There's I think a link to forms, yeah, business forms. You should be able to obtain one and print it out for yourself. And then let me go through the chat and see if I can identify some questions. Emmanuel asked whether we'll be able to provide this presentation. Yeah, sure thing. I'll send it to Ronald, and then Ronald will be able to share it with you. So we shall reshare, and I think also the recording is going to be, shared. Then Desire asked, what's the difference between beneficial owners and shareholders? So, so it is this: a shareholder is someone that's listed. This applies to companies limited by shares, and it's someone who's listed in the memorandum of association as the owner of the business, and also a person who is listed as a shareholder in the return of allotment of shares. Is a form that we file at the registry. So this shows that you are owner and your percentage is listed. However, the difference between beneficial owner and shareholders would be that a shareholder is a beneficial owner, but a beneficial owner can be a shareholder and someone also who's not directly listed as a shareholder. So it is that a shareholder is a beneficial owner, but beneficial owner is a broad term to include people who are indirectly owners of a business, may not be listed in the documentation. I hope that's clear. Then where do we submit the form? I think we've already answered that. Is there, okay, that's also about where the form is submitted. Then Desire asks, has the minister passed regulations on the beneficial ownership? Yes, they were passed last month. They were passed. So that's true. Then Margaret has a comment: imprisonment for data protection breaches for companies. Who is one to be imprison the officer or the board? So she's asking whether it's the board or the officer. That's so in this case, for data protection, it's the data protection officer. So that's why it's a very sensitive role. The person, actually, the law requires that this individual is trained, and trained in relation to the provisions of the law, trained in, and they need to be aware and know the rights, duties under those laws, the regulations and the act. So it's a very sensitive role. So make sure the person is competent. Yes, you'll get a copy of the recording. This is Linda. Then how do you merge work of Credit Reference Bureau and data collected by banks? So Elizabeth is asking, how do you merge work of credit reference bureaus and data collected by banks? So credit reference bureaus collect information on debtors. These are people that have borrowed from banks. So this their role is provided for under the financial institutions credit reference regulations. So their job is to list people that have gotten loans. So you get like a financial card and then fail to make payments. So your name goes there. That's the role of the Credit Reference Bureau. However, data collection, and data collected by banks. Oh, rather, your question is, how do you match work of credit reference bureaus and data collected by banks? So okay, this is outside the scope of today's discussion, but it's fine, I'll answer it. The data collected by banks is usually used, say, to provide a service, could either be what they call KYC, know your customer information, so they could know you before they lend to you or before they open an account for you. But credit reference bureaus are now at the tail end of things. So you've borrowed from the bank, failed to pay the bank, then the credit reference bureau lists you and then scores you. So meaning they score you, meaning to advise banks on your ability to pay. So if you are an offender, you continually do not pay back your loans, the credit reference bureau will be able to advise the banks. So it's a reference point for banks and lenders. That's what a credit reference bureau is, to help them make a decision on whether to lend or not to lend to you or your company. All right, then someone asked, let me see. I filed a notice of beneficial ownership. There are only 2 directors and shareholders of the company. I was told that the directors cannot be beneficial owners. Does that mean that this company has no beneficial owner? No, it does. The shareholders are the beneficial owners, but it's true that the directors are not beneficial owners in the sense that legally, there are 3 organs of a company. You have the members or the shareholders. So depending on whether it's a company limited by shares or a charity. And then there's the board of directors. There's the board of directors. There's also the management team. So you know that you can actually be a director without necessarily being a shareholder. So a company can appoint people who are not shareholders as their, a director. So a director need not be a shareholder, although a director can be a shareholder. So in that case, it means that being a director just means that you're the mind of the company, you take decisions, but you don't own the company. So that's why your application was rejected. Then the other one is, does the beneficial ownership rule apply to NGOs? Yes, it does, because NGOs register with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau as companies limited by guarantee, first before they are registered with the NGO, with the National Bureau for NGOs. Then please confirm whether partnerships are safe. No, they have to register with the Uganda Registration Services Bureau. That's important because the amendment of the laws includes the Partnership Act. And then why someone asked, Audrey asked, why is this information needed? I explained earlier that the government needs to be able to trace the true owners of a business to counter things like money laundering, tax evasion, and the like. Is there a fee? I think that has already been answered. I will not go over the questions that have already been answered. So let's see. There's a company that just registered and has not started operations also qualify. I answered that already. Mobile money agents. This person is asking about data protection. Mobile money agents who take phone numbers. They are registered as, first of all, you need to register as a company to be a mobile money agent. So, and if you collect personal data like phone numbers, yes, you'd have to register with the Personal Data Protection Office. Yes, so yes, I think the questions around NGOs, I think I've already answered that. So the form, I said you can get it on the URSB website. Let's see. Oh, and someone has already shared. Thank you for sharing the form on here. Okay. Oh, so the person is asking where we have administrators of an estate, do they have to register? Is that with you're talking about beneficial ownership? No, you don't have to register. No, unless you are administrators and shareholders, maybe say you have a company that's doing the administration, but no, this you won't have to. That answers that question. Does the beneficial owners registry apply to investment clubs? Yes, if they are, of course, they're registered as companies. So your investment club is a company. So all collective investment schemes would have to register. If you, because if you notice at the beginning, I talked about the amendments, the Trustees Act, to the Partnership Act, to the Companies Act. So if you take any mode of, if your company is structured in any of those forms, I've talked about partnership, trust, company that would have to register. Someone is saying, what form does a company limited by shares use? There's a general form, so that form applies to both types of companies, limited by shares and limited by guarantee. Okay. Oh yeah, so the person asked, does the new law also affect cooperatives? Yes, it does. At the beginning, I mentioned there's the Cooperatives Amendment Act 2022 that also introduces the issue of beneficial ownership. So in this case, yes, you would have to, and I presume you would have to file with the Cooperative Societies, registry, not URSB. Then. Okay, so I'm just running through, the questions keep coming. Let me just run through. We're about to get there. Let's see. What about Rotary clubs? Yes, it applies because they're usually registered as companies limited by guarantee. Yeah, so it applies to those. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. I hope I have answered your questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Moses. There are a couple of questions. Joy, Martha, please unmute and ask, and then we will have Margaret. Joy, are you there? All right, possibly we can have Martha first.
Margaret.
Margaret, rather. Margaret.
Thank you, Ronald. Mine is on the partnership. I think the answer was not so clear. So for partnership, does this ownership something apply or not? Apart from us having to register, please clarify on the partnerships.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Or you wanted to?
No, it's okay. Let me take the questions.
Okay, good. Joy, are you there? Joy, Martha?
Yes, I am.
Yes, please. Go ahead and ask a question.
No, I don't have a question to ask.
Oh, okay, good. I had seen your hand up. That's fine. Anne asked, must every company have a beneficial owner? That's a question from Anne. Then Elizabeth says, great presentation. Thank you so much. The recording shall be shared. Yeah, and how does the public get to know this information? Yes, this is part of it, but as you have rightly put it, there is still a lot of work which needs to be done to be able to get the information out there. Is it a separate form for each BO or a single form for multiple BOs? I think that's a question from Max. You will possibly address that. Harriet is saying very informative presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Moses. Yes, I see Kigwe. Kigwe, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, am I through? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you, Kigwe.
Yeah, yes. Good morning, Mr. Mukasa. Thank you for the moderation. Thank you, Moses, for that good and insightful presentation. Okay, mine, any of the question will be relevant. What does the consolidated document when registering a company cover?
Sorry?
You have managed to capture that, Moses?
Not really. I stopped at what does the consolidated form?
Document. Is it a document or form? What does it cover when one is registering a company? Based on that amendment in the Companies Act.
At the point of registration.
Yes. At the point of registration, yeah.
Okay, good. Margaret, you had another question?
No other question. Let me put my hand down.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right.
You could possibly address those. Let me just check the chat box and just be sure whether we have picked what is in the chat box. I think Michael, can I seek your services? Yes, I think the answer to that question is yes.
Oh, yes, I can.
For Moses, if a director is not a shareholder but influences contrary chairperson, can that person be considered as a beneficial owner? That is Moses Bwire.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you for those questions. I'm also grateful to be here, guys. Thank you for the appreciation. I'm really grateful. Now, I start with the first question on the issue of partnerships. Yes, partnerships have to file these beneficial ownership forms because, as I mentioned earlier, the Partnership Amendment Act provides for that. And then must every company have a beneficial owner? Yes, because when you're registering, you're required to declare whether you'll be a member or a shareholder. So there's no way that you can register without that information because it's a prerequisite for registration. So that's answered in the affirmative. It's yes. So how does the public get to know about this information? I believe URSP conducted a training yesterday. They had a training at 10 a.m. yesterday. I noticed, let me circle back to a comment made earlier. Someone said the fee is outrageous, considering the length of time. One of the complaints has been the short period of time that companies have been given to comply, considering the law was passed in September, regulations only last month. And I think this is my belief is that due to the sensitivity of the issue here, which is that they're trying to do, asset tracing, ensuring that people that have gained, wealth in illicit ways are discovered. I think it's more like they're trying to chase, and make sure that they can quickly identify these things, and also helps the other offices like the IGG and the like. So that's why it's expedient that these forms are filed. So I can imagine that's what has created a very short, space of time for people to comply. And then the other question is, where is the register kept? So the law provides that you ought to keep the register at your headquarters, at the company's headquarters. So each company will have a register of beneficial owners, alongside the Uganda Registration Bureau having its own register. So each company is required to, once within 14 days of filing this notice, which we are required to do by 11, you have to create a register. So basically, a register is like an Excel sheet of this is the owner, this is that. So you'll have to have that register, or you can keep it with your lawyer if it's your lawyer that helps with the legal issues. But ideally, it should be at your headquarters. Then, what does the consolidated form look like? Right now, I can't go into getting it. I have a copy, but it's a form in the amendment. So if you went just Google the Companies Amendment Act and then go to the form section. You will see how it looks like. And the information it requires. Then lastly, where a director is not a shareholder but controls the transactions in a company, yes, they become a beneficial owner. That's true. So because remember the definition includes being listed and also having control over transactions and the like. I hope that answers our questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that kind of, I hope it addresses the questions we have. Great. I will have one final go with, let me check the hands which are up. Margaret, please go ahead and ask your question, and then we will bring this to a close.
Okay, my question on partnership is not responded to.
Oh, I think Margaret's question was, do a partnerships part of this?
Sorry?
A partnerships
and then
part of this.
registration. And then re-registration, you talked about registering again.
Are they registered, or are you saying, do we register the beneficial ownership forms for partnerships? That's a question?
Yes, I think the beneficial ownership forms for partnerships.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's the same form. So far, what is provided is the same form. What we have there is it's blank. You know, it doesn't segregate between whether it's a partnership form or it's one form at the moment.
So even partnerships have to go through this process.
Yes, they have to.
All right.
Yeah.
Super. Great. Let me see. What is the penalty for non-compliance of a beneficiary owner's rule? That's from Emmanuel. So if we don't do it, what happens? And then clarification not given on companies limited by guarantee. Who is the beneficial owner here? Is it the promoter? Yes. So how does this play out for companies limited by guarantee? So what happens if we don't comply, and then how does it play out for companies limited by guarantee?
Okay, thank you. So the penalty is 500,000 per day by the company, and also 500,000 per day by each officer of the company. So that's the penalty under the Companies Act. The penalty under the Anti-Money Laundering Act is even more outrageous. It's 36 million per day. Yeah. But that's of course, but right now that's a separate registry. So we're only focusing on the company's registry. Right now the deadline is for the URSB, not the Financial Intelligence Authority. Yeah.
Great.
And then the next question is limited by guarantee. Yes, they are companies, so they have to file.
So who exactly is the beneficiary owner there?
Okay, to be the member. So when we ask that question, so when you look at the form, so you'd have to mention that not a shareholder, but a member. So the people listed as members in the memorandum of association of the company limited by guarantee are the members, are the beneficial owners, sorry, of the business.
What if the members are not natural persons?
Then for the sake of this registration, they're not required to be listed as beneficial owners under the Companies Amendment Act. However, they would be under the Anti-Money Laundering Act. But like I said, it's a bit gray in the sense that if you see the Companies Amendment Act gives powers to the Registrar General to enforce the Anti-Money Laundering Act. So I think consequently, it would mean that since she has powers to enforce that law, then the provisions of that law would also become relevant in the sense that that law requires both natural persons and legal persons to be listed. But I would like to say for this particular filing, let's just limit it to natural persons.
Right. So just for clarity, can you have a zero filing?
No, that's not possible. You cannot have a zero filing because a company is defined as an entity with 1 or 100 members. There's no 0 members.
So if the shareholders are still the beneficial owners, so it's just their names on this list.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Super. Great. I don't know whether there are any questions. Moses, thank you for great. I think we may just have time for just one more. Great. No, I think I'm trying to check the chat box, but I don't see any questions coming through, but lots of appreciation for your submission. Moses, thank you so much for sharing with us. I think the key takeaway, friends, is that this thing has come and the date, I think, is 11th of this month. So it is close. It is, and if you want to think about it more clearly, you just think about it like paying 500K every day starting on 12th. So I think that's an incentive enough for us to get this done, at least to the extent we can. I think Anne is asking whether there will be an extension. I don't know whether Moses can be able to share on that, but my impression is that very few people are ready. But Moses, what do you think? Do you think they'll give an extension?
I can't speak for the URSB. I don't know.
Yeah. I think them sticking to that will create quite a bit of revenue in penalties. But anyway, I guess the key thing is that this information at least has reached us, and it's important that we get out there and we respond to this new requirement and this amendment which has come. And I think the work which we need to do, quite honestly, is to just get it done so that we can be able to better run our businesses. And I think I liked what Moses started with, that when you comply, it makes things a bit easier for your business. A big thank you to everyone who has joined us. Have a blessed day. We are very honored to have you. We'll be back next week. Next week, we will have a detailed conversation on the questions which a business owner should ask their accountant. We'll have a flyer out, and we're going to share with you this presentation. We're going to share with you the recording of the presentation. A big thank you. And Moses, thank you for sharing your heart and really saving